Hey y'all, what's up and welcome back to 40 Days Through the Bible with me. Today is day 6. Y'all are hanging in there. It's crazy that it's day 6 or only day 6 because a lot of new people have joined us up until this point. So obviously I'm excited to have more women here who are desiring to not just have a deeper relationship, but desiring to know the Lord for themselves. I think that's the big thing because you go to church, you can go to all the events and do all the things, but when you have your own time to read the Bible and get to know God as your father, it's like a whole different, scenario. It's a whole different situation. So I'm going to read out of here first, and then I have my life application Bible in NIV. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. God rescued Joseph from his murderous brothers, and in return, through Joseph, God saved his brothers from famine. Okay, today's reading comes from Genesis 50, and the Bible verse of today is, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This statement alone is just so impactful because it literally just reminds me of, and maybe it's hitting me a little bit different because I've been in situations where it's like, you intended to harm me, but look how great that turned out for me. Like, don't play with her. Genesis 50 in the NIV version reads this: Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning." That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. See, Jacob's son did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron and Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brother then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intend to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also, the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." So this is him like forecasting, like y'all are about to be called out of Egypt into the promised land. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. So that is the end of Genesis. We made it through Genesis. So that's how Genesis ends. A tiny bit of a backstory. So Joseph had brothers. His dad took a very like disproportionate liking to him. He was like the favorite child. His brothers were super jealous. And so his brothers basically sold him into slavery. And he was sold into slavery, but he got his way out of slavery, obviously with God's help, got his way out of slavery. He was appointed to a high court in Egypt, and like he was well respected. So he basically God rebuilt him, right? But he rebuilt himself, self-made from the bottom to the top. And when he heard his dad had passed away, he came back, and his brothers were nervous because they're like, oh my gosh, we like literally sold our blood into slavery, and they were nervous. And so Joseph is a really good example of like forgiveness on a major level, because he's like, you know what, it all worked out. Like, I'm not going to hold it against you. You're always going to be good with me. We're brothers. So a lot better than most of us would be. So let's go to the questions for today. So question number 1 says, before we begin, let's sit with the idea of forgiveness for a moment. When it comes to forgiveness, it seems one person always has to give in, even if the other person has not taken responsibility and or asked for forgiveness. Why do we find it difficult to forgive? What factors do you consider when deciding to forgive someone? So I can personally just say straight up, like, I don't consider any factors when it comes to forgiving you. I forgive you because first of all, I just do not like holding grudges, but I don't want me holding a grudge about you to take up space in my mind. And that's how I look at it. And so I don't really hold grudges. I did, when I was in my earlier 20s, have to sit down and have a conversation with myself about, like, just because you say you forgive someone, if you still have these like strong emotions when you see them, if you're still thinking about that person in a negative way when they're not around you, then you really haven't forgiven them. So I did have to learn like what true forgiveness and what real forgiveness looks like. But now it's like, there are no factors. I'm just going to forgive you because I don't have time for you to be holding me up from my destiny and my God calling, because you are taking up space in my brain. You do not live rent free in my head. Okay. You do not. Nobody does. So I put pride makes it difficult for us to forgive, which it does for a lot of people. We either don't want to be wrong or we don't want the other person to get away with what they did. And that's how I felt a lot in my 20s, is like, I don't want you to get away with what you did. So I would be like, I forgive you, but you're going to pay one day. Karma's going to get you. Like all those things we say, like, I don't even say all that stuff anymore. I'm just like, God got it. Whatever. Okay, so we feel a lot of times if we don't forcefully hold them responsible, then no one will. And guess what? It's exactly what Joseph said in the end of Genesis. Who am I, God? No, that's not my job, right? It's not my job to hold you accountable for what you did. Even though it hurt me, look, it all worked out for the better good, which I knew it would because I'm a God girl, and it will, right? So it may take some time to get to that point, and you probably will have to have some difficult conversations about that, but it's going to be worth your while to do it, even though it's going to be hard. So continuing on, it says, now let's study in action in Genesis 42. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy food due to a severe famine in the land. So this is before what we just read, which is chapter 50. Upon their arrival, Jacob's sons found themselves before their long-lost brother Joseph, who was now governor of Egypt. They did not recognize him, however, because 20 years earlier, Joseph's brothers, driven by jealousy, sold him into slavery. So the way that they found out that not only was he still alive and not only was he not a slave, but that he was the actual governor of Egypt, was that they were in a land that was experiencing a famine, and their father sent them to get food. This is 40 something years later. Okay. So it took him 40 years to like build back up from where he had been pushed down to. Take note of that, 42 years. But they didn't even recognize him. Like, he was a whole new person. And so that's how they figured out, like, oh my gosh, that's him, right? So when his brothers stood before him, Joseph truly held their fate in his hands. Joseph had a choice. He could punish and seek revenge, or forgive and seek reconciliation. Joseph chose forgiveness. A lot of times you will have a choice, and it's a test. God's like, are you gonna, I know that you feel a certain way. You probably feel a certain way for what they did to you, but are you going to do what's right, what I would do in my likeness? Or are you going to, bow down or give in to your humanly lust and desire to make people pay for what they did. Which, by the way, when you make people pay for what they did, does not feel any better. Like the things, whatever it is that they did to you, it still happened. It still stands. You don't have to be friends with them. You don't have to see them. You don't have to talk to them. None of that. But you can let it go and work on forgiving them, because it does take up space and emotional capacity on the inside of you that space is meant for something else. Okay. So question number 2 says, let's look at more scripture to see how it speaks to forgiveness. Read Matthew 18, 21 through 22. What is Jesus' standard for forgiveness? How do the following passages speak into Jesus' words about forgiveness? So you're welcome to go read it. I'll put it on the screen. But Jesus requires everyone to forgive because he has forgiven us. It is up to us to pass on the favor we have been given. And this applies in forgiveness. This applies in a lot of areas in life. What I've learned over time is that a lot of times when people are reacting negatively to you or they're being nasty to you, it's because they have something going on in their life. And it's not a personal jab at you. Even someone who is like your enemy, right? Let's just say it's someone who's your enemy and they're like, poking at you and doing things like they're probably saying to themselves and saying to other people, I'm doing this to hurt her. But it's really because they're hurting. Like hurt people is like the most truest statement. Like, honestly, it's probably written in the Bible somewhere because it's just so true. Hurt people. And so when you understand that, when you come in contact with people who are just so, you know who I'm talking about. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You just have to be like, you know what? I'm going to pray for you tonight. Because my friends will tell you, I'm like the most calm person. I'm like, she got an attitude. I'm praying for you tonight because you need it. Something is going on in your life. It has nothing to do with me. I'm good over here. And so you kind of have to like carry that, right? Carry that air, the same air that Jesus had, who was like, listen, somebody just needs to be healed in here. Question number 3 says, are you ready to take a step toward forgiveness? Your heart may not feel like forgiving, but like Joseph, will you choose to start the process? And remember, forgiveness does not mean God doesn't value your pain and hurt. They are real. He just doesn't want them to rule your heart and steal the abundant life he has for you on the other side of forgiveness. So you have to make that like cognizant decision, like I'm going to forgive. We see another beautiful biblical truth played out in Joseph's story. Listen to the powerful words Joseph spoke to his brothers. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good and to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children, and be reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Question 4 says, what is the truth Joseph shares with his brothers in Genesis 50:20? Read Romans 8:28 and write it down below. How does it speak to what Joseph said to his brothers? What are the 2 qualifications for this promise to apply? So here's what I wrote. Joseph says that what you thought was going to break me is instead now being used for good for our entire family and legacy. The 2 qualifications are for those who, 1, love God, and 2, are called according to his purpose. Okay? So there are 2 qualifications for that promise to apply. By the way, when I say qualification, that means it's a covenant. Like you're coming into agreement. A lot of what is said in the Bible, it'll say qualification, like it'll say that word, or the Bible will say covenant, right? The Bible will say sometimes agreement. Sometimes it says contract. Like these are words that mean there are 2 parties coming together and both parties agree to do something specific in order for that contract to be fulfilled. So while everything in here is good and great and awesome and consecrated, a lot of what is in the Bible that God has said, I can give this to you. Like this is what I have for you. It is a covenant, meaning that he has done his part and now you have to do your part. It's not, oh, God has a blessing for me, so I can just sit down and relax and the blessing is going to come for me. Like, no, that's not how it works. Okay. So understand a lot of things are a covenant. And in this case, those 2 qualifications for the promise to apply are 1, love God, and 2, if those who are called according to his purpose, which all of us are, but you have to admit and say, yes, I am called according to his purpose. And so all of these things, this abundance that God has created is available for me. When the harsh realities of life hit, do you still trust God to work in the circumstances to bring you to a place of freedom and favor? Sometimes when someone betrays you, you have to go through a waiting period before you see what the purpose of that betrayal was. We know for a fact that all things are working together for our good. We know that, right? But it doesn't mean that we're going to see that immediately. When I first did this Bible study by myself, these 40 days, this area right here struck me because I was working on forgiveness from infidelity. And so at the time, I didn't see, I still haven't gotten to that point yet, right? I have forgiven, but I could not see at that point, oh, this all made sense. Like it was all working together for a purpose. It may take months. It may take years. It may take decades. It took 42 years. That's 4 decades. It took 4 decades before things came full circle. Last question of the day. What do you need to trust God with today? Will you trust God at his promise spoken through Joseph and now to you that he will work it all, every bit of it for good because you fully belong to him? You are his beloved child, created with a good plan for a good purpose. Joseph's life speaks such hope for us in these times. God is able to transform even the very worst of circumstances for our good and his glory. He is always in control, even when it seems our world is out of control. And so that is all for today, day 6. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Drop me some comments in the chat below, in the comment section below. If y'all have questions or if you want me to dive deeper into the topic of forgiveness in some other videos. But that's all for today. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.